apartment association, people coming directly to the office. Personal contact from a constituent is still the most important thing. And when you think about it, it is the most important thing because as members of Congress, they work for you as their constituent. They don't work for me. They don't work for Seth. We can each only vote for one member of Congress and two senators. And so the House of Representatives member from Montana doesn't really care what I think. So in-person meetings are the easiest way for our staff to ask and understand an issue because it gives us the chance to ask questions and put a face with that issue, with that ask. So getting that face-to-face communication is important, but it also gives a chance to see somebody in the district that they work for with a concern. Okay, we're going to talk first about what you do before the meeting, how to schedule, how to prepare your materials. And then we're going to talk about how to conduct the meeting. And then again, if after we have some Q&A, we'll talk about following up after the meeting. Make sure that you'll see throughout the tips that we have for doing different employing different techniques. You'll be exposed to some of the research that CMF does, but please make sure that you're asking questions. We should have both the chat and the Q&A enabled.
Yeah, go ahead and just ask questions, as they come up, and I'll try to monitor them as we go. So, we'll take a break, within the conversation to answer questions as well as that moment 2/3 of the way through. It's just a lot more interactive to answer questions throughout the program. So we'll try to do that. So just go ahead and when you have a question, go ahead and type it into that question box, and we'll try to get to it as they come up. All right, so first things first, we're going to talk about what you do before meetings. Honestly, a lot of what you do before meetings is going to make or break the actual meeting itself. So Jim's going to kind of walk us through sort of that what to do before meetings, and then I'll take over with what to do on the during part. So go ahead, Jim.
All right, Seth. One of the things that we want to guide you to, for those of you who are going to be attending the Advocate Conference coming up on March 25th and 26th, make sure when you register for the meeting, if you haven't already, if you haven't registered yet, you can do it on the NAA website. Make sure you check the box that says you consent to share your registration information with your affiliate. Your local affiliate is the one who takes the lead in scheduling meetings with the congressional delegation. So they need to know that you're coming so they can make sure that you're included in those plans for those meetings. The affiliate staff are going to have access to the registrations in something called Apartment Haven, which is a platform we have for them. Actually have it open in one of my browser windows to upload the registration list when we're done with this call. They should be contacting you about scheduling the meeting. So I want to go make sure I'm part of the Congressman Smith meeting, make sure that they'll contact you and to verify your ability to participate and coordinate all that. And in the Advocate Conference itself, we're going to have the issue briefing as we normally do on the Tuesday afternoon before the Wednesday lobby day. We'll have an opportunity for everybody to get together with their affiliate and coordinate all the different things that are going to be going on during lobby day. Now, because this is Congress, and because Congress has a ton of things going on right now, it's important to realize also when you go into this, your ability to be flexible is often what will set the table for a successful interaction with you, member of Congress. They have a lot of scheduling changes, and you can have a lot of things that change in the last minute. So expect someone to call and say, well, we need to move this meeting up 20 minutes. We need to move it back half an hour. The chief of staff isn't available, but we have the legislative director who handles that issue, those sorts of things. The other thing that, again, to understand why we want to give you the advice that we give you is to understand Congress's process and how they go through and setting up a meeting. So once you realize these things, you can make sure that you're on the way to getting a good meeting scheduled. So first thing is that they're going to get an invitation to meet with a group usually through the website or through a phone call. The person who does the scheduling for that office will review that invitation. They then have a decision point. If they don't have what they need in that form or on that phone call, well, that goes into the circular file. If they don't have what they need to schedule a meeting, the invitation is going to be declined. Hopefully, what's going to happen is that they're going to ask you for more information. You're going to give them more information. The scheduler is going to have what they need, and then you begin the process of getting the complete information for a meeting and getting a meeting scheduled and on the books. Now, sometimes the senior staff may also review it and see that they don't have, it's not an issue the member is able to address. They may not have the time for it. They may decline it, but they may approve it, and hopefully they're going to approve all your meetings for those of you who are going to be here at Advocate. When we start to think about how to get it started, how long in advance should we make the request before we want the member themselves to personally participate in a meeting? So how soon in advance notice should we give them? You can see that sweet spot is really 3 to 4 weeks. Some need a little bit more. Some will work with a little bit less, but usually I'd expect a month. And since Lobby Day is on the 26th, we still have plenty of time to get those requests in if you're coming to Advocate this year.
Hey, Jim, I just want to chime in real quickly also, if I may. One thing that we're developing and we're getting ready to launch it any minute now is a new tool for you to be able to tell us about the meetings that you have scheduled. And then also on the day of, after those meetings have occurred, to then update us on those meetings about what actually happened. That's going to be a new function or feature that is in the Community Hub, where you'll be able to log in meetings that you have scheduled as those get scheduled. And then on the day of, the people who are participated in those meetings will be able to see the meetings that are associated with their primary affiliate. So if members of, if there are meetings that happen with for the Apartment Association of Kansas City and you happen to be a person who that's your primary affiliate, you'll be able to see all the meetings that were scheduled and then select which ones that you want to submit a report on. Just wanted to kind of note that that's something new that's coming out. So be watching your emails and other our newsletter distributions for more information about that.
Right. Yeah, thank you, Seth. We're really, really excited to see that new tool and how we use it. Just wanted to answer a quick question in the Q&A that Allison Shunison put in. Should a meeting be scheduled with the sponsor of a bill or with your representative if they're not the sponsor? Always the latter, because you're a constituent of only one member of Congress. Or, if you live in one area and your apartment community or your business, if you're a supplier member, is across into another district. You could prove constituency in two different districts, perhaps, but you always want to meet with the representative that you're a constituent of because they are the ones. They are the ones who have to respond to you. The co-sponsor, the original sponsor of a bill may not even be from your state. And quite frankly, they're not going to schedule a meeting. The office won't schedule a meeting with you. I live in Virginia. If I tried to schedule a meeting with the representative who represents Kansas City, Emmanuel Cleaver, even though he likes NAA a lot, his office is not going to schedule a meeting with me. He's going to tell me to see my own congressman.
Yeah, I would just
But good,
also
good
note, though,
question.
of course, if your representative is the bill sponsor,
Yeah.
then yes, you should still meet with them and talk to them and tell them, you know, ask them, thank them obviously about for taking their action that they've taken, for being supportive and for sponsoring the bill. I'm assuming that's the one, if that's one that we're actually in that we support versus one that when they're sponsoring one that we don't support. Either way, though, you want to go and have a conversation with those bill sponsors to talk about our issues. Whether you thank or spank them is one thing, and then to ask them about what's next. You're really in a position there. You're in a really key position when you're in that situation to find out more information about what's the timing, what else can we be doing to get some information about and intelligence about what it is that we might be doing to advocate to advance that bill to the next step in the process.
Another couple of quick questions here. Ki Trang Ho asked, will they do Zoom meetings? Is this as good as in person? Me answer my 2 cents really quickly, but I'll defer to Seth on this. For the purposes of the advocate conference, they're all going to be in person. At least that's our hope. Um, but a Zoom meeting can be effective if you're trying to reach a member of Congress or their staff. It is possible to have a Zoom meeting with them and talk through an issue. Many of them are willing to work with Zoom. They discovered the ease of Zoom or teleconference during the pandemic. So it is possible, but for our purposes, the Advocate Conference is the main meeting we're focused on, and that will have in-person meetings.
Yeah, and while we are, because of the timing of this, we are going to be talking a lot about the Advocate Conference, and so we will be kind of storing in some specific information about that. This webinar is also intended to, inform you about scheduling meetings outside of that context as well. And so, yeah, virtual meetings are a great new tool where members can you have access. You don't have to get on an airplane to come out here all the time. If you have something relevant to talk about during the session. Also, it's a great way to engage with members if you're from a big state, and it's going to take a while for your member to get to your part of the state. These Zoom sessions and can be virtual meetings can be really helpful. Having said that, um, the Congress has returned to the workplace, just like the rest of the world has made that transition. And so, in-person meetings are still more effective. They demonstrate, a level of investment that virtual meetings, just lack a little bit. But they're both really great ways to engage. So they shouldn't be something that would be taken off the table either.
And
We
one
also have
last
a
one for
question from
now. Yeah.
Robin about
Yep.
most effective way to request a meeting, a phone call, direct email. And we're actually going to have a slide on that in just a little bit, Robin. So we'll answer your question in a bit.
Thank you,
So,
Robin. One of the
so
ways that you get to the right path on the Chutes and Ladders flow chart, you want to know who, what, where, and when. You want to tell them what's the meeting about. You want to tell the scheduler or the form when you're filling it out who's going to be participating, and if it's a larger event, who's going to be in the audience. You want to make sure you're specifying what venue. Again, for the Advocate Conference, it's going to be the DC office. It's going to be their House or Senate office building. If you're at home, you can see them at their office in the district or in state, or in some instances, you're inviting them to your apartment community to do an apartment tour. And one of the tips you always want to keep in mind is that have a range of backup or alternate times. Something may line up perfectly for Wednesday, the 21st at 1:27 p.m. because all the stars have aligned. But then the member of Congressman, sorry, he or she's out of the country on a congressional delegation. Well, shoot. So have a backup plan in mind. And this gets to Robin's question. Every member of Congress on their website, whether the House or the Senate, has a contact link, and they have something called scheduling requests or just like that. That's usually the best way to do it because they're going to ask you to provide everything that they need to know. That's the chance to get moving the right way on the flow chart. They're going to ask everything that they need to have in hand in order to consider the request. So that's usually the best way to go.
yeah, and every member has different preferences. Most of them have like a web form or something like that. They have specific information that they will ask you. That's why it's really helpful to pay attention to the tips that Jim shared with you on the previous slide about getting all that information gathered before, who's going to be in the meeting, what's it about, what's the venue, any other kind of relevant information. Because they're gonna ask you a number of questions in that meeting request, especially if it's something where like you want the member to attend an event in the district or something like that. They're not going to give you a meeting. They're not going to send their member of Congress into a meeting that they don't have enough information about. They're not going to send them in there blind. So just be prepared and have all that information up in front, because if you don't provide that complete information, it's either going to get your request is either going to get deep sixed, or they're going to come back and ask you for more information. You just kind of slow down the whole process. So it's important to have all that information up front at your fingertips when you go get ready to do that. But then go on the website. Some of them say, there's a web form. Some of them are going to ask you to fax information. Maybe somebody might ask you to send a carrier pigeon, whatever it is, whatever instructions that they request of you to make that request, follow their instructions to the letter. If you don't, that they have those processes set up for a reason. Each office is a little different. Consider it like there are 535 small businesses up there. They're all independent and they do things differently. Um, there are obviously some standards or, kind of typical procedures there, but be prepared, just to follow the instructions that the member outlines on that website. So you want to know the who, what, where, before you contact the scheduler. I just kind of talked about that. Follow those instructions. Be flexible with those dates. Be open to meeting with staff. A lot of times people put in the request, they want to meet with a member, but being open to meeting with staff as well is going to guarantee that you get that meeting. And uh, members of Congress really put a great deal of faith and trust in the people that work for them. And so, dissing staff is definitely not the way to go. They're going to find out about that. And then lastly, you want to follow up on your request. A lot of people ask, how long should I wait after submitting a request to before, maybe following up? And so when I was at CMF, we actually asked schedulers that question, how long does it take for your office to respond to a request for a meeting with a member? And what we found is basically, if you haven't heard within about 2 weeks after you're making a request, it is completely fine for you to make a phone call or shoot an email to the scheduler and ask, hey, I submitted this request a couple weeks ago, and I just want to follow up on what the status is of that. Make sure it doesn't fall through the cracks. That's a completely reasonable thing to do. All right, next we're going to move on to what to do during meetings. And so the first thing we're going to talk about, though, is written materials. We asked this question at CMF members this. We asked whether people agreed or disagreed with this statement of most of the written materials left behind by constituent groups as part of an organized fly-in or lobby day are helpful to our policy decision-making process. And what they found was basically a little over 60% of the people who responded to that question said that leave behinds could be better. And so we want to make sure that the things that you prepare to leave behind are going to be those things that fall into that 40% group and really help us stand out above the crowd. So with leave behinds, one staffer said this. They said, please do not bring me glossy folders with tons of background information. It's going straight into the recycling bin. I used to go in with big folders with reports and all that stuff. And, I was kind of disappointed when I got to CMF to discover that a lot of that stuff that we worked really hard to produce and spent a lot of money to produce was getting deep six. But the fact is they don't have a lot of space to store information and things like that. So coming in with, big folders full of paper is not a best practice these days. CMF also asked this question: when meeting with a group of constituents as part of the organized fly-in, please indicate the helpfulness of the following written materials. What we're trying to find out was, how long should like an if issue brief be? And what we found is, a leave behind with 5 pages or more, not very helpful. A 1 to 2 page issue brief is really helpful. So coming in there with things that just sort of are concise and kind of just explain the issue in a couple of pages is really what they're looking for. Again, they're not looking for those 50-page reports that I used to produce when I was at Goodwill, even though it was a labor of love. One House Chief of Staff had this to share, and it was something, it was really important kind of piece of information that caused us to kind of rethink leave behinds. And they said this, they said, it would be helpful to get the 2 page leave behinds emailed prior to the meeting. We have to do a memo for each meeting that our boss reads prior to the meeting. And so what that really led us to understand is that we shouldn't be thinking about leave behind so much as we're thinking about them as read aheads. And so that's why last year we made the shift from doing where we handed out everybody uh, paper, folders to in their meeting packets to bring, and we went electronically. And we're going to do that again. We will have a very limited amount of folders, paper folders for people. We know we got feedback from people that expressed, they were in meetings where the member asked, like, "Where's my paper?" So we're going to make sure that you have some of those meeting materials on paper for those exceptions. But we're going to be doing electronically again this year. The prep materials, we're getting ready to post those on NAA's website. We will get you a link to that URL when those materials are available. Hard copies, we're going to have prep packets, hard copies, you'll get those on site, I believe, when you go after you go through the registration. So once you report to the registration desk, they'll hand you a folder. The leave behinds, though, again, as I noted before, those are going to be emailed in advance to congressional offices for the meetings that we know about that are scheduled. If we don't know that they've been scheduled, we're not going to do that, right? So make sure that you tell us about those meetings through that new meeting tracker tool once we activate that. There's also going to be on your prep packets, there will be a QR code like we had last year. So if by chance you go into a meeting that it was scheduled and the person hasn't seen the read aheads that we've sent ahead, you can just simply just show them the QR code. They can snap that on their phone and then they can access those materials that way. So that's our fail safe there. So that's enough of with the leave behinds. Now let's talk about what to do during meetings. And the Management Foundation asked this question about meetings of legislative assistants and legislative directors. They asked this question here. They asked, how frequently do you experience the following in meetings with constituents? And so I'm just going to kind of walk through some of the findings that they found. So here's one that's kind of concerning. They actually found that almost a quarter of the congressional staff said that they frequently experience meetings where one or more of the constituents was rude. So going in there and like acting super surprised because the person that you're meeting with looks like they just graduated from high school, or complaining like, oh, I thought I was going to meet with the member, I'm just meeting with staff, that type of stuff. That's not a great way to express appreciation for staff. It comes off as rude. So you want to make sure that you don't do things like that. So that brings us to tip number one, which is, dude, be cool, right? You want to make sure that you're not rude. And I know nobody would act like that, but we want to make that point anyway. One congressional staffer said this. They said, be polite, be diplomatic and unscripted. Starting a meeting with "you work for me" and ending it with demands for a standoffish will create a standoffish interaction at that time and in the future. So enough of on that point here. The next point the next finding was this one here, that they didn't convey a personal story on on the issue, related to the issue. And we know that stories are just a really important and powerful tool in a constituent's toolkit. So that leads us to this one here. You want to communicate what it is that members of Congress are looking for from constituents to provide. We know that these are the four things that every member of Congress is asking themselves when they're having a meeting with a constituent, members of Congress or staff. And it goes like this. First, they're asking themselves this question: what action is it that you want me to take? And then they're thinking, and why is this issue important to you? They're not looking for the NAA's super refined wordsmith statement. They want to know why it is that you care about this particular issue. How is it impacting you, your residents, the people that work for you, those sorts of things. Then they want to know, how does this impact the district? They're looking for, national numbers are great, but what they're really looking for more is exactly how is this issue impacting the economics in my district, the people in my district, things like that. So you can talk about, how many people who are residents that have been affected, or how many people that are working in your properties are being impacted, things like that. And then what they also are looking for is this one here. And I talked about that, when I did that last data reveal, is this one. What are the personal stories? So, you talk about that larger sort of economic impact of the whole district, citing those data points, but then they want to know what the personal stories are that just illustrate, kind of put a human face on that issue. A lot of people, I would just note that when it comes to telling personal stories, a lot of times people will kind of fall back on talking points. Personal stories are not talking points. Personal stories are about actual, either a person or a particular place. There's a hero, right? There's things like that, So you want to kind of think about like, here's a story about a guy named Dave, and Dave had an experience that illustrates the issue and the point I'm trying to make here. So making sure that you're actually really telling personal stories. We know that these are the four things that members of Congress are looking for because CMF asked this here. They asked, how helpful is it for messages from constituents to include the following? And here's what they found. Personal story related to the issue or related to the bill, 80%. Constituents' reasoning, 87%. Specific ask, information about the bill would have on the district or state. You can see that these are the four things that that members of Congress and their staff are really looking for. We also wanted to know was how well it is that constituents actually provide this information. And so they just changed one word in that question to this. They asked, how frequently do messages from constituents include the following? And here's what they found is that, personal story related to the bill or issue, 79% say it's helpful, but only 25% say that it actually happens very often. And it's kind of the same thing along those lines with constituents' reasoning for the bill, right? 87% say that's helpful, but yet only 42% say that happens frequently. Start doing a little bit better with, or no, actually not. The specific asked, only 52% say that happens frequently, and the information about the bill would have on the district or state, huge discrepancy there, right? 99% saying that's really helpful, but only 16% saying that happens frequently or very frequently. So what you can see here, this is a blueprint for how to stand out. You provide those four things, you're going to be standing out way out ahead of the crowd in front of everybody else. So be prepared. Start preparing now about how it is that you can communicate answer these four questions during your meetings. All right, enough of that. Next point is this: didn't know the members' relevant committee assignments, and then also was unspecific with their request for action, which comes to this point here, which is you want to be prepared to resonate with the members' priority and their circumstances. And this point here, it's really important to do your research in advance. One House staffer said this. They said, frequently constituent groups come into DC meetings asking the member to take an action that he's already taken. And so when you're doing the research on a member of Congress, these are the things that you want to do. You want to create a legislative profile. You want to, so first thing you want to think about is things like, political party, whether or not they're in a leadership position, committees that they're on, particularly if they're on a committee like, the Housing Committee, HUD VA, those types of things, the Finance Committee, those types of committees. Those are important committees that have jurisdiction over issues that we care about. So that's a really important one to pay attention to. And then also look at what their own policy priorities are. Next, when you're developing a legislator's profile, you can also do research on like the people that they have relationships with, right? Spouses, you can research their key staff, people that they're related to. And then you can also develop a personal profile. So things like, what's their religion? What colleges did they attend? What was their profession before they became a politician and came to Congress? Different clubs, were they in the Rotary Club or something like that? And also just like what their personal interests are. These are all great things that can help you to build a connection. But what I would say here is when you're doing this research, these are the things that legislative profile, the party, leadership committees, that sort of thing. Those are things that you really need to know before you go into a meeting. And then these other two things are things that are nice to know. Those are things that will really help you to make a stronger connection. It demonstrates that you've done a little deeper homework if you can kind of tap into that type of information. But if you don't have time to do everything, at least you want to do that kind of the basic stuff. One thing I would also note when we're talking about doing that research, in fact, so we just had a training about using artificial intelligence a half an hour, ended a half an hour before this webinar started. And so I was just thinking, I'm like, I'm old, I'll admit it, and I don't use AI much. And I kind of I'm sort of avoided it. And so I went into Word during this training and just typed in, give me talking points that I would deliver on affordable housing to Mark Warner. And I could not believe what was generated there. It was incredible. So also just like give me Mark Warner's profile. What are his legislative priorities, and how does that affect and where does that stand on his stances with affordable housing? And it kicked out an answer I couldn't believe. I mean, it would taken me so much longer to do this on my own, but it was in seconds. This AI kicked out some pretty amazing intelligence. So brand new resource I just discovered about an hour ago. So, and I'm talking about it now. All right, next in the data is this, too many talking points in the meeting. This is an issue where, people come in and they have lots and lots of things that they want to talk about. But the fact is, especially if you're having a meeting in the DC office, your meeting's going to be maybe 20 minutes long, tops. So you just don't have a lot of time to talk about, a laundry list of things. So you really want to choose just one issue that you're going to focus on. One House Chief of Staff said this. They said, asking for support of numerous pieces of legislation lets the elected official decide the priorities, and often they will choose the easiest one, which may not necessarily be the most important one for the group. So if you go in there with like five asks, they're going to do one of them. And the chances are they're going to pick the easiest one. And then when you go and you do that follow up and you say, I asked you about five things. I just wanted to know what your decision was. They're going to say, we decided to do the really easy thing. Thanks for your meeting with us last month. Um, so, as you're getting ready for these meetings, and, this is particular for Advocate, I think we're going to be talking about two specific issues this year. And so this is a phrase that is something you can start almost every meeting with, and it goes like this. Rental housing advocates are on the Hill today talking about two issues, and I'm here to talk about this one. So you can kind of nod to the second issue, and if you get to it, you can touch on it, but you really want to choose which issue is the priority issue that you're going to discuss, and make sure that you have that one specific ask. That's the ask. That's the primary thing I've come to ask you for is I'm here to ask you to co-sponsor HR 1234. All right, next finding was this, that there are too many participants in the meeting. Um, sometimes that happens where you have lots and lots of people that want to participate in a meeting, and sometimes you have to make tough choices about who's going to attend and who's not. So that comes to this point here, which is you want to advocate as a team. If you're going in all by yourself, that's one thing. But if you're going in there with multiple people, you really want to make sure that you're prepared to advocate as a team. And, when I think about, sort of, working as a team, I've spent a lot of time as when I was a parent with my kids were younger, sitting on the sidelines watching soccer games. And if you've ever watched a children's soccer game, you know what I'm talking about. It's pretty chaotic. And here's the thing about this picture here. I'm pretty sure that the kids in the blue uniforms are on one team and the kids that are in the green uniforms are on the other team. So I'm kind of curious about why it is that one kid in the blue team's taking the ball away from the other kid. And you can also see they're kind of moving around in the big cluster. It's not looking very strategic. Nobody's playing in a position. And here's something that you may not be noticing is this guy right back here, though. Look at the look on this guy's face. That is the look on the face of the legislative assistant that you meet with. If you walk in and do a team or do a meeting like these kids are playing soccer, that's the look on the legislative assistant's face as you walk out of that meeting. That's what they're going to have on their face. So you want to make sure that you really advocate as a team. So when you're advocating on a team, here are some things that you can do to prep for that. Make sure that you do. First off, you want to, meet with the people that are going to be involved in your meeting, and you want to agree to a strategy for every single meeting. Every meeting is going to be different. You're going to be meeting with different members of Congress that have different priorities, different politics. You want to really tailor each meeting to, kind of so that your pitch will resonate with that particular member. You also want to, for every single meeting, this can be different as well. You want to determine which positions you're going to play. So these are some positions you might be a candidate for. Again, you may end up being the storyteller in one meeting and then doing something different for another meeting because your story is going to really resonate for meeting Y, but not resonate at all for a meeting with member XYZ. Next is you want to, so you have a plan, but you also want to prepare to pass the ball and then play backup, right? So you don't want to just be the person who's always talking all the time. You want to, kind of pass it along so get other people in your team involved, but also play backup and be prepared to make adjustments. Just like we watched a team try to adjust a couple of days ago at halftime and they failed miserably. Yay. Anyway, you want to be prepared to make adjustments. Sometimes meetings kind of take a different uh, path than you were expecting, and so you want to be prepared to make adjustments as well. Other things I'll just quickly rip through. Don't repeat what's already been said. You want to stick to your schedules. If a meeting's been scheduled for 1 o'clock and you happen to be walking by the office at 10:30 instead, don't walk in there and ask, "Hey, can we switch times because I just happen to be here?" They'll probably accommodate you, but if they do, they're going to probably get you to a really junior staff. You're not going to end up talking to the person that would be best to speak to. So stick to your schedule. After your meetings, you want to huddle with your team and debrief right away. And then when you do that debrief, you want to decide who it is that's going to do the follow-up. And also, one of the roles I noted in that earlier slide was the role of a reporter. The person who does the reporting isn't the person who's just supposed to sit there in silence and take notes. That's the person that you've designated to do that, click into the community hub and tell us what happened in the meeting. Also with big groups, if it's a really big group, you've got 10 people that want to go to a meeting, ask yourself, is my participation going to make a difference? And it might just make sense to bow out and just limit that so that it's not overwhelming. But if it is going to be a big group, you want to make sure that you call ahead and give the office a heads up so that they can plan to make an accommodation. Sometimes they can get like a book an ante room or something like that that's a little bit bigger to accommodate a larger number, but you got to give them a heads up first. All right, enough about that one. Next is didn't know the member's history on the issue. Related to that is didn't have data on the impact of the district or state. So we kind of talked about those four things. And then lastly is this one here, which I think is really disturbing. And it happens to be, the most frequent thing that happens is that they didn't understand the negative consequences of the bill. What this says is that most of the time, constituents go in and they go in loaded for bear with their talking points, and they're all prepared to speak about like make their case. But when they're asked about, what's the opposition think about this, or, because members of Congress, they want to make an informed decision on the issue. And if you can't speak to that, that really kind of says to them that you're just coming in with a bias and your slant, and that you really haven't really balanced out the ask. So be prepared to also, just be able to speak to what the opposition says to this and what their arguments are. So that leads me to this last tip, which is you want to be prepared to address what the opposition's arguments are. One House Democrat said this. They said, "I particularly admire somebody who's able to articulate the opposing argument that can give a good faith account of the other side. They seem to understand my situation, and I respect that." So here's the winning formula for conducting an effective meeting. First thing you want to do is you walk in there, you want to state your business and make sure that you emphasize that you are a constituent. Then you want to explain your reasoning for why it is that this is an important issue that you're bringing to their attention. Provide them information about the impact on the district. You want to tell those personal stories. Then you want to restate your ask. So a lot of times I would just start my meetings with, "I'm Seth Turner and I'm here to talk to you about this specific issue. And we are here to ask you to co-sponsor HR 1234." I know for most meetings, when you have meetings, you want to do a little small talk, but they're pretty used to this like meetings because again, they're 15 minutes long tops. They're really used to that, just getting in there and stating your business and telling them what you're about to ask for. I know a lot of times it feels more natural for people, in the rest of the world to kind of wait to do the ask at the end. But starting with the ask is a really effective way to go, and then restating at the end. Then you want to listen for a commitment. And also you just want to listen to anything else that they might have to share with you about that issue, about where it is, what the process is, what their thoughts are on, the prognosis and things like that. But you really want to listen for a commitment. Do they ask something? Are they going to say something like, "Yes, we will co-sponsor that we plan to do that," or are they going to do something like they might say, "No, we're not going to co-sponsor it for this reason," and make sure that you note that they're not. I mean, that's not that doesn't indicate that you've had a failed meeting. It just means that they know what their position is, and they're letting you know that. So here's the thing: politicians, they're kind of hardwired to want to say yes to you. So if they've had to say no to you once, then you know that you've kind of got a chip where so that they'll want to follow up with you later on they want to say yes to you about something else later. Then you want to make sure that you follow up and doing that follow up, that after you've done that follow up, that's really the things that really make a meeting really effective. So on the topic of following up, that's why it's really important when before you leave those meetings, and honestly, I like to do this um, right when I walk into the lobby. And it's this. I make sure I get the business card. So most lobbies have like, on the desk somewhere, there's some little shelf with everybody's business card there, and you just go in there and pick up the one of the person that you'll be meeting with. That's going to give you some really important information. It's going to give you the email address for the staff person that you're going to be meeting with, so that then you can send that follow-up email directly to the staff person that you've met with versus having to go through some sort of a web form, which is goes through a totally different kind of mail process than a direct email to staff. And that's going to give you that email, not to just staff, send them that email immediately after the meeting, but it's going to give you a connection to them that you're going to utilize throughout the year as you engage with them. So let's take a real quick break. I don't know if I've seen any other questions. I don't see
Uh,
any
we've
open.
had a couple, yeah, we've had a couple come in, a handful that I answered live. But we did just have one question from Eddie Ivy from Tennessee asking what the two issues are going to be this year. The two issues are tax reform and getting rid of notice to vacate. Uh, Bills to get rid of the CARES Act notice to vacate provision were introduced, I believe, yesterday. It was either yesterday or the tail end of last week in both the House and the Senate. The House is a bipartisan bill again this year, with Democrat Vicente Gonzalez joining Republicans. The Senate, I believe, is just Republicans for now, but we'll have those bill numbers out. And then tax reform, we're still massaging the exact nature of the ask that we are going to ask you to deliver. But there are a number of different things in the tax bill from 2017 that are going to expire. And so there are a number of things we're going to want to flag for offices. But those are the two big issue areas: notice to vacate and tax reform, because the 2017 bill, for the most part, expires at the end of this year. So it is important that we are in these offices early this year to let them know what our priorities are, whether it's the 1031 exchange, whether it's the 199 Cap a 20% deduction for pass-through businesses, all those kinds of things. Another question from Allison: is notice to vacate the same day as the 30-day Fannie Freddie wait period for evictions? This is my favorite and least favorite answer in politics, which is it depends. Yes, broadly speaking, but no, in the sense that Fannie and Freddie put that provision uh, into their own sort of covenants. So that's going to be something that requires a separate. It's going to require a separate act of Congress to get rid of that. And so part of the broader congressional agenda this year for NAA is something called the CRA. Jumbling my acronyms there, apologize. CRA is the Congressional Review Act, and it allows Congress to take a look at regulatory proposals or rules that were promulgated by the previous administration within a certain period, what's called the look back period. So there are a number of things, including that Fannie and Freddie 30-day notice, which I believe, I may just have to double check this with our policy team, but I believe that's only for certain project-based rental assistance programs. Um, but it's going to require Congress to go in and undo that using that Congressional Review Act authority that they have. The CARES Act notification is a much broader problem because it's been interpreted by judges all around the country as effectively being the law of the land, even though it was tied to a specific emergency, which was the pandemic. And even though the pandemic has ended, the federal government said the pandemic has ended, you're still having places where that notice is being tacked on, even when you're in a state like New Jersey, which doesn't even have a notice period. So you've sort of created this whole new overlay of federal law on the landlord-tenant relationship where there never was one before. So we want that's the prime one to get rid of the CARES Act portion, but there are other things that have sort of trickled down into other rulemakings that we're going to have to work on as well.
Thanks, Jim. And thanks for those questions. And if you have more, please just go ahead and just pop them into that question box and we'll try to keep answering them. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to just kind of give a real fast, kind of high level touch base on follow up and why that's important. And then we'll get you out of here on time. So when you talk about follow up, for those of you, if you play tennis or golf, you know the importance of having a really good follow through, right? You know, like If you don't have a good follow through, then the chances are the ball is not going to go in the direction that you want it to go. And it's really the same for follow up when it comes to meetings with members of Congress. When you don't follow through, a lot of times, especially if you're in a meeting where they end up giving you one of those really vague commitments, which is, I'll let the member know that you were here. Right? That means that you're going to have to follow up with them because they're not going to come back to you and say, "Hey, we wanted to let you know I talked to the boss and we've decided to co-sponsor the bill." What the congressional management asked this question, they wanted to know how well constituents do follow up. So they asked, do constituents or their organizations generally follow up in a helpful and timely manner? And what they found is basically that 85% could do a much better job. Um, I'm going to share with you this statement by a House Legislative Director, and I hope that the audio actually works. If it doesn't, I apologize and we'll move through. But there was a House Legislative Director that I was on a webinar with, and we recorded her. And so she had this to say about effective follow-up and how constituents follow up.
There's an ask to sign on to a bill or to sign on to a letter, especially something with a deadline, and I never hear about it again. To me, I'm wondering how much of a priority that is for the group. The groups that are more effective are the groups that remember me when they come back, and they remember the congressman and they say, "Oh, thank you for doing this thing that we had asked you to do the year before," recognizing that we have a relationship, that we have partnered on things in the past. Anytime that I can establish a relationship with a group, their name, just if I see it in my email, I'm like, "Ooh, I know, I want to open that email." Or if I see it on my calendar, I'm looking forward to the meeting instead of, like you said, sometimes 28, 30 meetings a day. Some of them you look forward to and some of them you don't.
So I think we'll just end on that. That, think about what you see there and what you heard that legislative director talk about, where she says, if there's an ask and it's particularly something that's time sensitive, and then, they come in and they think it's important enough to come in and talk about it, but then you never hear about it again. It actually ends up sending an unintended message that you didn't, that's what unintended means. It's a, a message that's unintended. You're sending, if you don't come and follow up, it sends the message of, thanks for meeting with me for 15 minutes. I really was just there to waste your time and look at the cherry blossoms or something like that. You want to follow up and let them know. Following up lets them know that this is something that's important to you. And it's important enough for you to flag something in your schedule to call or email 2 to 3 weeks later to say, "Hey, we talked about notice to vacate. We asked for you to take this action. You said you'd bring it up with the boss, and now I'm calling to ask you what the decision was." That will really that lobs a shot across the bow of any staffer. They're going to be thinking about you, not just then, but they're going to be thinking about you long into the future because they know they're probably going to see you again next year. And when they do have that meeting next year, they're going to pay a lot more attention to you just because of that. So that's, just really, it speaks to the importance of follow-up here. I see we've got some questions here. Lisa says, "This has been really helpful as it will be my second time at Advocate." Lisa, welcome back. We're glad to have you back and thank you for the feedback. I'm glad that it was helpful. Um, oh, here's a great question. How many follow-ups are appropriate without feeling naggy? Um, I think it depends. If they keep kind of blowing you off with vague answers, I think it's fair for you to keep coming back. I mean, I love there's a scene. I need to grab the clip from it. If anyone seen the movie Ferris Bueller, where Cameron gets in the car and, Ferris has been calling him about, come over and pick me up. And here's Cameron. He's like, "He'll keep calling me. He'll keep calling me. He'll make me feel guilty. He'll make me come over." That's good follow-up. So, it's as many times as it takes to get them to tell you, what their decision was. Um, Eddie Ivy asks, "What's the best way to address staffers that will not respond to follow-ups?" Keep following up, keep asking them. One of the tricks I like to do is if you've sent an email, if you sent an email and then they ignored it, then go and find that email in your sent items and reply to all back to them with a just a message of, hey, it's me again, just circling back on this. What's the decision? So it shows like that there's a thread of them ignoring you. Usually that gets people to pay attention to you, at least if they haven't, at least maybe you have to do that twice. They'll pay attention to you after that.
And I think I know what office you're talking about too, Eddie. I think I remember that last year. The other thing too, if you're at the point where okay, I've asked for follow-up a good amount of times, I'm not getting there. Let us know, because then what we're going to do is we're going to loop in our whichever one of our lobbying team covers that office. There may be a disconnect between the staff and the member on that. So we're going to alert them that, we were here, we've made the ask, our folks have reached out, and we're not getting a lot of feedback. And even if they have a really well thought out reason for why their answer is no, I need an answer, right? We need the feedback. And not responding to that request is not particularly professional. So thank you for that. Thank you for that question, Eddie.
There was also just one question about was this webinar recorded? And the answer is yes, but I started the recording about 3 minutes after we started talking. So you miss all that really fun stuff about our bios and stuff. It starts up right around when Jim started talking about that first CMF data point. So sorry, I forgot to start the recording right on the moment, but yes, it was recorded and will be made available to people who want to watch it again and again and again. Robin asks, when you fly literally from one coast to another to have 15 minutes to make an impression, and you end up with staff holding you in the hallway, what would be an effective way follow up that might get a better meeting next time? Or even better, is there a way to make it clear ahead of time in a diplomatic way to prevent that from happening? Here's what I would say to that, Robin. That happens all the time. Those meetings in the hallway, you should not take that personally. It is the way it is. Space on the Hill is really, really tight, and sometimes they just don't have space available, especially in spring. There are other groups that will be having their constituents up there also having their meetings. So it just is sort of the nature of the beast. Be prepared for anything. Sometimes you get to have a meeting with the member in their office. Sometimes you're out in the hallway. Sometimes you're even having to have the meeting while you're walking with people from one place to the next. So it happens. There's really no way to really prevent it from happening, with the exception of, when you've scheduled meetings. I mean, again, be prepared for anything to happen. You could have a meeting that was scheduled and they plan to have you in the office, and a vote comes up or something like that. It's just the nature of the beast. But don't take it personally. I know you've traveled. They recognize that you traveled across the country to do that. And then, make it a follow-up where you can have a meeting in the district where things are a lot less chaotic. And we'll work with you. We're going to be working this year to make sure that those are opportunities that you have as well. Jimmy, got
One
anything
other
to add to that?
question. Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough for our members who are taking time off, who are making arrangements. Either they or their company are paying out of pocket to be here, and it is frustrating and it's challenging. But I think at the same time, it does present an opportunity to sort of build that relationship that one legislative director was talking about in the audio that Seth said. And I remember that our first meeting with these guys was out in the hallway, and they kind of rolled with it, and then they had us for a property tour, and now they're the phone call I want to answer. One other question that came up in the chat, maybe we'll close on this. Mike Niebauer asked, someone who's never attended before, knowing that you're going to meet people on both sides of the aisle, is there really a concern about what colors you should be wearing? So should I only wear the red tie for Republicans and the blue for Democrats? Seth, you may have a different view or something to add here. My thought is, even if you're meeting with a member, I don't think they're um, really worried about that. And if you're meeting with staff, I don't think the staff are going to notice, what color tie you might have on as a gentleman, or what color scarf you might have as a lady. If I'm going into a Democrat's office, I'm probably not going to wear my Make America Great T-shirt again, right? If I'm going to a Republican office, I'm not going to wear a Democratic Socialist of America T-shirt, right? I mean, I think it's you're going to the Hill, it's business attire. And I think after that,
Yeah, don't
I
throw
think
out
it's
your
pretty
poop suit.
straightforward. What's
Yeah,
that?
I said, don't throw out your blue suit. Um,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and for me personally, you know, I hate wearing ties, so maybe just don't wear a tie. You don't have to worry about it at all. I think at that we're at time. Unless there are other questions, I just want to thank everybody for your attention and for your attendance. And we're really looking forward to seeing those of you who are planning to come to advocate in March. We'll see you next month. And everyone have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.